Yes, again.
Like that little drum thing there. Okay, let me, without, as my friend used to say, without further ado, let me take us into chapter 5. And what I'll have to say about this is what you will be saying in your little blurb about it. Here, in this chapter, the UnderGroundMaster, which is what I've been nicknamed, opens up. It's a chapter from a book, within a book. It's a chapter from a book within a book. This is Shackles Across Time. And the man who wrote the book is a man named Chester L. Simmons. I may as well be upfront about this and say that Chester L. Simmons is my alter ego, and he takes us in this chapter from a book within a book. He takes us back to the time when the slave trader Quartey's descendants inherited a curse that is still on them. It'll be much clearer as we go on. Kofi pulled his canoe up on the beach and dragged a small net full of squirming fish out of the craft. The sun was beginning to brighten over the village. The title of this, I may as well say, before I go any further, is Ori, Ori, O-R-I. It has to do with your head, and I'll just let it go at that. Kofi pulled his canoe up on the beach and dragged the small net full of squirming fish out of the craft. The sun was beginning to brighten over the village, and he had done a day's work while others slept or thought about doing what he had already done. Grandfather will be pleased with this catch. He took note of the number of fish his people call those that are sweet to the tongue. Yes, grandfather will be pleased. Other fishermen were coming ashore up and down the beach. The village was waking up. The distant thump of women pounding fufu was beginning. Blessings of the ancestors upon you, Kofi, and blessings also upon you, father. Blessings, Kofi. Blessings, auntie. Ah, Kofi, you have already been fishing. Last night before we left for sleep, I told you I would be going to fish early. Early? Ha! How early is early? Early is the time before the sun pushes the moon out of the sky. Yes, this is early. Let me see what you caught. Kofi dumped the fish from his shoulders, pleased to show his good friend Kwame his catch. Kwame plowed his hands through the squirming fish 3 times, closely studying the various kinds of fish, and announced, "Your grandfather will be pleased with those that are sweet to the tongue." Kofi tried to hold his pride in. He didn't want to make his friend feel bad. "Tomorrow, before the sun pushes the moon away, we will go fishing." "Thank you, Kofi. I will leave for sleep early to be with you. Blessings." Blessings. Kofi plowed through the sand onto the solid ground of the outskirts of the village and made a wide trek around the enclosure of the lost outsiders. The enclosure was actually a prison compound for prisoners of war, enemies of the village, debtors, and others who had earned the title Lost Outsiders. The enclosure made him feel sad and ill at ease because most of the people in the enclosure were foreign to him. They came from distant villages inland. They didn't speak the language of his people, and they were being sold as slaves to pink men who came in a large canoe with sails. He didn't really know what to think of the whole thing. From the front door of his village, he could see the large canoes docking at Elmina, the very large slave-holding place. He knew that his village was a secondary source of people being shipped beyond the seas. But at 20 years of age, he felt himself to be too young to form an opinion about these matters. The thing that bothered him most is that the people in the enclosure seemed never to stop complaining. If he got early to go fishing, they were complaining. It seemed they complained about being crowded together, of not being fed enough, of not being given the food they like, about lack of water. If they shared a language or the other lost outsiders, they sang their complaints in that language. Aside from everything else, even if they didn't share a common language, everyone knew that they complained because they were fearful of being taken away to be eaten by the big-nosed pink people. That was a common fear, shared by all the people in the village. When the big-nosed pink people came to their village, all of the pregnant women hid for fear that eyes of the big-nosed pink people would pollute the insides of their stomachs. Women and children generally were asked to be absent because of the possibility of contamination from the big-nosed pink people. The only people who were legally allowed, according to village laws, to be present when the big-nosed pink people came ashore were those men and women who had attained a certain level of entrepreneurial or spiritual development. They were the ones who were considered capable of dealing with the big-nosed pink people. The big-nosed pink people were unaware of these things because they dealt with one man, Elder Quartey, and he reaped the rewards that accrued from their ignorance. Elder Quartey's father had been the first to recognize the possibility of being wealthy from dealing with the strangers and loaning money to the people of the village. The elder Quartey, father of Kofi's friend Kwame, had loaned Kofi's father the money to buy a boat and nets for fishing after the Bookman family had lost everything in a slave raid. Father Bookman, his wife, and 3 children, except for Kofi, who happened to be with his favorite grandfather at the time, had been kidnapped by a slave raiding party. It was a crushing blow for the family and the whole village. The father had taken his family, minus Kofi, to their yam cassava farm, a half-mile north of the village, and they were never seen again. Kofi grieved privately for many months. His grandfather, Ode, was a powerful catalyst for his will to move forward. Kofi, there are many things that will happen to you during the course of your life. Some of these things will be good, some not so good. You must not allow those not so good things to twist your mind. Kofi straightened his back as he entered the main street of the village. He remembered his father's advice. A man who does good deeds should always walk straight. The first large compound on his right belonged to the Dankwas. He pretended that he didn't see the large doe-shaped eyes of Mary Dankwa, the girl he wanted to marry, peeking at him through the shuttered window of her family house. Kofi felt the load on his shoulder lighten for a few steps as he passed her family compound, and then the load was heavy again. There were so many obstacles for them to overcome. He knew that she felt as much for him as he felt for her, but there were so many obstacles. Her family had become Christians, and they were quite wealthy. They were condemned by some in the village for becoming Christians, including his grandfather, Ode. This is foolishness. How can they pretend to feel close to someone that is so far from them, that was brought to our village by the big-nosed pink people? No, the Dankwas were not considered sensible people by many, but the ruler of the 9 villages was a fair man and prohibited anyone from behaving badly toward them. It wouldn't be right to prosecute them because they have chosen to worship in a different way. If we do not persecute the bringers of this teaching, how can we justify persecuting the converts? The ruler of the 9 villages was considered one of the wisest men in their land, and his words were taken very seriously. The Dankwas were not persecuted, but they were not as well thought of as they had been before they converted. Kofi was not concerned about religious feelings. He was afflicted by the sickness that makes men dream. Her name was Mary Dankwa, and he wanted her to become his first wife. He had spoken to his grandfather often about his desire to have Mary Dankwa as his first wife. Ah, but you understand, my grandson, the teachings of their religion prohibit them from being married to a man who needs more than one wife. Then perhaps I may be satisfied to have only one wife, no matter how difficult it will be. Foolishness! Foolishness! The old man had many reservations about his grandson's sickness, but he wanted to see happiness in his life So he accepted the mission of negotiating with the head of the Danquah family. Kofi walked past the largest home in their village, the compound of Elder Quartey, the slave dealer. He felt the breath tighten in his chest. Old man, you and your grandson owe me many cowries. Your son borrowed from me. I want payment before the next full moon. The end of the next full moon was 3 times past, and Kofi was well aware of the danger he and his grandfather faced. Legally, according to the laws of the 9 villages, they could be required to work for the elder Quartey until their family debt was paid, or they could be sold to repay the debt, or sent to canoe of the big-nosed people, sometimes paused at their village before moving on to Elmina. They could be sold in the same fashion that the lost outsiders were sold. Kofi felt a heavier burden than the weight of the net full of fish on his shoulders. It was his responsibility to repay his father's debt because his grandfather was past the age of heavy labor. We will be able to repay him when I harvest the crop from our farm at the end of this moon. A smile covered his mouth as he came within sight of his grandfather squatting under the council tree near the compound. He looked so much at ease. Blessings, grandfather. Blessing to you also. Soon I will be with our ancestors, and I won't have to say those words. The handsome young man and his wrinkled, almost toothless grandfather exchanged big smiles. The old man's humor, as usual, was realistic to the point. The fishing was good this morning. The old man, not one to use a lot of words, gestured for Kofi to spread the catch out in front of him. He did so, and took great pleasure seeing the old man's mouth form the words, "Ah, those that are sweet to the tongue." After his grandfather nodded his approval of the catch, Kofi took the netted fish inside their small compound and shook them onto a large woven mat. He spread them evenly, drying them before smoking. After spreading the fish, he washed his hands and joined his grandfather for a breakfast of kinky and smoked fish. The two of them squatted around the small fire in their compound and ate, not exchanging words until the meal was finished. Kofi brought up water in a large earthenware bowl for them to wash their kinky, sticky hands. Kofi? Yes, grandfather? I have spoken with the father of the one who causes you to have milky dreams. Kofi knelt in front of his grandfather, eyes downcast, anxious to hear the news, but outwardly calm. The father looks favorably upon you. Kofi nodded, concealing his excitement. But he is a modest man, and he made it plain to me that you are not the only one in the village interested in marrying his youngest daughter. I am aware, grandfather. Are you aware that the traitor Quartey is also having dreams? Kofi felt a cold shiver grip his heart. He knew that the son of Elder Quartey, his friend Kwame, felt drawn to marry Danquah's beauty, but he wasn't aware of the father's interest. I must tell you honestly that the father favors the traitor. Kofi's chest tightened from the inside. But the girl favors you. Now, because of their involvement with the new religion, they are offering the girl the opportunity to choose her husband. I do not understand such foolishness. The old man sputtered under his breath, trying to conceal his pleasure at being able to convey such good news. I thank you, grandfather. Thank me by frying those that are sweet to the tongue. Kofi couldn't resist a smile that erupted into a laugh. I promise you that those that are sweet to the tongue will be even sweeter this evening, grandfather. Ha! We shall see what we shall see. The big canoe is here! The big canoe with wings is here! The big canoe with wings is here! The announcement was shouted from one end of the village to the other. It was an announcement that served to notify the pregnant women to remain secluded, and for those who had a reason to see the sight of the visitors on the beach to be there. Kofi's grandfather stood with the aid of a well-carved walking stick and gestures for Kofi to accompany him. Come, let us take a look at the big-nosed pink people. They are interesting to watch. They strolled together, the old man resting his right hand on his grandson's shoulder. By the time they arrived at the beach, the trader Quartey had already had a low table with 4 stools set up on a level space. Trader Quartey grunted a greeting to the grandfather. It would have been impolite not to greet him, and frowned at Kofi's presence. The lost outsiders in their compound 50 yards away were silent as they peered intently through the bamboo slots of their enclosure. The villagers stood, sprawled or squatted in the shade of the seaside palm trees, talking quietly about the arrival of the slave merchants. They had watched the arrival and departure of these men many times, but they were endlessly fascinated by them. They could not understand why they wore clothes that pinched and made their bodies sweat and smell, and shoes did not allow the toes to breathe. They knew that they were from a place called America, because that is what they were told. But none of them had ever been there and returned. America was simply beyond the conception of their village mentalities. The men from the big canoe with wings pulled into the shadows in their rowboats, were pulled up onto the beach by the villagers and stepped onto the land on wobbly legs. Grandfather, you see how it is when you've been on the sea for a long time? Kofi whispered. The old man squinted at the strangers as they were welcomed to Trader Quartey's table with calabashes of palm wine and fresh coconut meat. They are not wobbling from being on the sea. They are staggering from the effects of strong drinks. They are drunk. Some of the other villagers had also detected this and were smiling behind their hands and exchanging sly comments. Despite the fact that the trader Quartey was the only one amongst them who knew enough of the pink-nosed people's language to speak with them, they moved in closer to listen to and watch the exchange. The slave trader, Quartey, and the slave traders immediately got to the business of exchanging goods for human beings. Quartey explained that he had 50 people for sale. The white man indicated to him in pidgin and gestures how much he was willing to pay. Quartey always wanted more. They bargained. After 2 hours of bargaining, the 2 traders finally agreed on the terms for their trade. 2 muskets of decent quality, rum, 4 pounds of marble-colored beads, 10 blankets, 10 cutlasses, and 5 iron pots. Finally, the lost outsiders were herded from the compounds, each of them bound by hand and foot to the next one. Kofi smiled at his grandfather, who had covered his head with a palm leaf and gone to sleep. Some of the villagers who had wandered away during the course of the negotiations now returned to have a last look at the scene. Kofi thought of nudging his grandfather awake, but decided not to. He's witnessed this scene many times. The prisoners, who were soon to become slaves, linked by strong lengths of raffia rope, were led to the waiting rowboats. The chief of the big-nosed pink people, after carefully inspecting the slaves, indicated that he was pleased with the bodies he had purchased. Once again, the traders drank together. Strong rum from the slave ship, not the innocent palm wine. The white chief's men loaded the captives as Trader Quartey's workers unloaded the trade goods. It was all done quite efficiently, the result of long hours of practice. Kofi felt himself becoming drowsy in the afternoon heat. He had been awake before the moon had been chased from the sky, had worked hard all morning. He didn't understand what Trader Quartey said to the chief of the whites, but he felt afraid when he realized that he and his grandfather were surrounded by the slave dealers of both races. Yes, this is the last one. Kofi heard Quartey called out as they suddenly attacked him, grappling to tie his legs and hands. His grandfather awakened immediately and began to swat at the attackers with his walk and said, "Leave him be! Leave my grandson be! Leave him be!" "Take him," Quartey countered. "Take him. His family debt is 3 months past, and I cannot wait to be repaid any longer." The old man was brushed aside as the attackers subdued Kofi. The word spread rapidly through the village. "Kofi is being taken! Quartey is being taken!" The villagers rushed to the scene, undecided about what could be done. They were all aware, of course, that the Boatman family was indebted to Trader Quartey, and that he had a perfectly legal right to sell Kofi if he chose to compensate himself. But they didn't expect him to sell the boy to the big-nosed pink people. "Hey, Trader Quartey, do not sell the boy to them. Here's his grandfather's other walking stick. Elder Quartey, this is not the proper way to have your debt settled. Allow the boy to work for you." The Danquah family, including Mary, ran to the beach. Mary was crying and pulling her hair. None of their admonitions and lamentations touched Quartey. "Everybody here knows our laws and traditions. This is what I have decided to do." Kofi realized how undignified it was to struggle against such odds and simply allowed himself to be captured. He was dumped into a rowboat with the lost outsiders. He called out as they were rowed to the big canoe with wings, "I'm going to return. I swear upon the bones of my ancestors. Stay well, grandfather." And he waved shyly in Mary's direction with his hands tied. "I swear upon the bones of my ancestors, I am going to return." Some of the people on shore began to wail their lamentation for those who are away. It seemed like a dream. How could such a thing be happening? The people of this village were not sold to outsiders. The people from the inland villages were reserved for sale to the big-nosed pink people, which is why they were called lost outsiders. It did not seem proper, and many people cried. They had to prevent Mary from running into the surf and trying to swim after the rowboat carrying her husband to be away. Suddenly the beach was hurricane quiet, except for Mary's wailing, the sound of grown men crying, and the heavy velvet of the surf brushing onto the beach. Grandfather O'Day, Kofi's father's father, stabbed his cane at Trader Quartey's testicles, his heart, his head, and pronounced a curse that would affect future generations of Quartey's descendants. Kofi took careful note of each procedure that took place as he was taken aboard the slave ship Clotilde. He didn't understand what the letters meant, but he burned the shapes into his mind. He found himself beginning to relate to the lost outsiders. It was a strange new feeling. In the space of a few short hours, he had become one of them. They spoke languages that were different, but there was a simple connection of food, water, and the desire to be freed of their bondage that united them. He suddenly understood things that no one had to explain to him. The canoe with wings seemed to be sweeping across the waves as it traveled the short distance up the coast to Elmina. He didn't feel as horrified, scared, and ill at ease as the others who were crushed together with him below deck. He knew from long experience of watching it happen that the Clotilde was now going to stop at the main slave warehouse called Elmina to unload the rum, guns, beads, and miscellaneous things that they used to buy human beings. The trading, palaver, drinking, would take days. He made a careful study of the people sloshing around in their own body waste. We've only been inside this horrible canoe for a short time, and it's already filthy. What will happen when 300, 400 people are squeezed into this space? Kofi had his answer 3 days later when 400 people struggled to survive in a space designed to accommodate 150. Kofi had begun to find common root words with the lost outsiders. The additions were using languages that had no meaning for him, but he searched for common threads. "Remember, my grandson, in any unfamiliar place, cast about, for familiar things. Kofi began to pay close attention to the number of times he saw the sun chase the moon from the sky through the cracks in the deck, inches above their heads. He watched people around him surrender to claustrophobic despair and die. The stuff they were fed caused him to vomit or have diarrhea. He choked the gruesome mess down and dreamed about the feast-day foods from his village in order to keep it down. They were taken to the deck of the ship and forced to dance every day. He worked hard to keep himself physically fit under these horrible conditions, instinctively realizing that we have to remain strong to survive. He became a leader and changed by serving as an example. He gave some of his food to the weaker ones and offered good advice and counseling to the weak-hearted. Stay strong. Remember, the journey through life is not always easy. The chief of the big-nosed pink people took note of him. Keep a weather eye on that one. He shows a bit too much spunk for my taste. They were at sea 3 days before the first storm swept across the ocean and almost swamped the Quartey. 3 tremendous storms, one right after the other. Kofi prayed to the ancestors to remember the advice his grandfather had given him many, many times. Kofi, there are many, many things that will happen to you during the course of your life. Some of these things will be good, some will be bad. You must not allow those differences to turn you around. After the storms and the driving rains that soaked through every pore of their bodies, there was the bitter heat of the sun. Kofi joined the protesting moans that swept through their ranks. He knew he wasn't dead, but he didn't feel alive anymore. The close space that they occupied, sloshing back and forth in their own body waste, made him feel like one of the fish he used to capture in his nets. He had heard rumors all his life about the place where the lost outsiders were taken, and now he was being taken there. Where is this place? What is it? How long does it take to get there? What would happen to us after we get there? The captives were beginning to communicate, to use pantomime words to convey their thoughts. Some thought they were being taken away to be eaten. If so, Kofi argued, then why are they feeding us so badly? Animals that are going to be eaten are fed well so that the meat will be fleshy and sweet. Some thought they were being taken to the other side of the world to be workers in the fields. Most of them didn't know what to think. They had only one great desire, and that was to be free and back in their own land. 9 weeks after Kofi was captured, while they were being forced to do their dance, the chief of the white men called out to them, "Look yonder, you savages! That's America!" Kofi stared in the direction the man was pointing with a cat o' nine tails in his hand. Kofi stared at the distant outline of this new place, America, and gritted his teeth with hatred. He had no way of knowing that Trader Quartey had paid a wicked man to strangle his grandfather in his sleep. He had no way of knowing that Trader Quartey had been swept up a month after his capture with a number of other villages and sold into bondage by the warriors of an inland village. He had no way of knowing that his wife-to-be refused to be led from her grief and died of a broken heart. He had no way of knowing that his grandfather, the guardian of strong medicine, had pronounced a curse on Trader Quartey, a curse that would affect generations of Quartey's descendants. He had no way of knowing any of these things. He didn't even know that he had survived the Middle Passage.
Oh.
End of chapter 5.
Wow.
And I won't read the first page of chapter 6 because I'm drained.
Okay, so you took us back
I was beginning
into
to live a little bit of that after you think about it a little while.
So you took us back into the past to find out why we are going through so much in the future.
It's the Sankofa effect. You can look back like the bird does to find out what's in front of you.
Oh my God.
In a sense, that's symbolically what this is about, the chapter from the book, O.E.
Wow.
And
Woo.
I'd like to say that the book can be purchased
At Author House, Amazon. You can have Barnes ordered at Barnes & Noble. It is also an ebook. And Odie Hawkins' website is www.odiehawkins.com. And I believe it's this week that the Miami Book Fair.
The book fair, yes, I
is
forgot.
going.
I haven't mentioned that in quite a while now. But let me just say that it's for November 16th and 18th. The street fair admission for Friday night, November 16th, is free. Saturday and Sunday, November 17th, 18th, it'll be $10 for those 13 to 18 years old, $5 for those over 62 years old, and no money, free for those under 12. Miami-Dade College, Wolfson Campus, 300 Northeast 2nd Avenue, Miami, Florida. See you there if we can get there. Otherwise...
And that is in 2018, November 2018. So, with enough said and thoroughly exhausted, but that...
Let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up.
Tomorrow, same time, same place.
Same time, same place, and into the future.
Hey, I heard that.